Here's the question, guys. This is kind of a cousin of trust. Um, One of the things that really builds trust in a relationship is when we can trust someone to follow through on what they've said they're going to do, right? So they're going to show up. A week later, they actually follow through on that commitment and they show up. You give them a task to do, they actually follow through on that, and it actually happens. That actually loads on one of the greatest factors of the uh, results of being able to feel trust, and that is something called the ability to feel careless. So, if I give you a great example of this from my own life. John Townsend and I wrote a lot of books together and done a lot of things together. And when you have to write a book with somebody, there's a deadline and there's a path that's got to be, and there's certain kinds of concepts you want to make sure, and you're each working apart from each other and all of that. In so many years that we did that together, and we would get our outlines together, and this, that, and the other, and there was a date or whatever, and I'd lateral that into his lap, and he'd lateral a bunch of other stuff in my lap. What was great? I could think about my work because I didn't have to think about his. I could be careless about it. I didn't have to guard myself. I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to check up on it. It was a careless experience. I could be carefree, is another way. Because I just don't ever know of an instance where I hadn't seen the guy follow through. He was also an Eagle Scout, which you don't get there by not following through. The Bible talks about this as diligence. It talks about it as faithfulness. There's a lot of different terms that come into that. In Numbers chapter 6, it says, God is not a man that he should lie. Has he not said it? Will it not, come to pass? I think is the way it's worded. And follow through is a big deal. A big deal. When somebody makes a commitment to you, it is a big deal. Now, sometimes people will get blamed appropriately in behaviors. We trust each other in different ways, and we judge each other and see if we're going to be trustworthy. And basically, we tend to judge ourselves by our intentions. If I've got good intentions, we kind of don't think about sometimes how we're actually behaving or what's coming through on the other end. As long as we mean well, the other person doesn't get to experience our intentions. What they get to experience is our actual performance and our actual behavior. So we judge ourselves by our intentions, and people judge us by our behaviors. Did you show up or not? Well, I meant to, but blah, 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 blah. And in that disconnect, people appropriately get blamed, he or she's kind of bad on follow through. Well, sometimes that can be, and it's true, I'm not letting anybody off the hook here. But it's not that they're unable to follow through. That's not what's causing that. The follow through is a symptom of another problem. I'm going to give you 2 or 3. If you have trouble with follow through, or if you work with somebody who has trouble with follow through, or you have kids that have trouble with follow through, or whatever, here's a couple of other reasons that might be the real problem that you have to focus on in order for follow through to happen. All right. Number one, with all good intention, saying yes to more things than you have the capacity to execute on. What an innocent person that lousy non-followed througher is in that instance. Somebody asks them to do something. Yeah, I'd love to do that. Oh yeah, I can do that. Or oh yeah, but they don't realize in their head how many checks they've written on their time or energy, and they haven't checked their bank account lately. I remember I had a friend in college, and I noticed he wrote a check, and then he just, paid for something, but he didn't write it down. And I glanced over at his checkbook, and he didn't have one record. Some of you don't even remember checkbooks, but he didn't have one record of any check that he had written. I said, "Why didn't you write that down?" And he looked at me like, Why would I do that?" I said, "So you know how much money you have in your account." And he goes, "Why do I need to know that?" I said, "So you don't overspend what you have." And he said, "Oh, never thought about that." I said, "Well, what happens when you do?" He said, "Oh, well, my dad owns a bank, so I don't really know how they do that." Okay, well, not many of us are in that kind of position, nor is that. If I wish I could talk to the father now, it's a psychologist. Maybe you don't want to do that. But the question is, sometimes we write checks on time and commitments and this, that, and the other, and don't realize we are way overcommitted. And then some of those are not going to be followed through on. So the follow through is not really the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. The problem is people have got to get really good observing egos, which means looking, the eye that looks at the eye. That's what observing egos. The me that looks at the me, looks at yourself, and ask your question: do you really have time and energy for that? And if you do that, is anything going to suffer? If you follow through on that one, something else not going to get done. All right. There's nothing wrong with making that commitment, but you have to make sure that whatever you say yes to, that you have the fuel to do it. And if you don't, then you're going to take something else off your plate. Okay. That's the first thing I want you lousy follow throughers to begin to look at. Now I'm, really, really judging you here hard, right? I'm kidding, because this is an area, if you look at, some of my weaknesses, this one right here, this reason, not the, forget the absence of follow through, by and large, I think, in book writing and showing up for speaking things and consulting projects and all of that, by and large, I get it done. But you know where I've had to pay for it? Because I didn't say no enough early up here. I've had to pay for it a lot of times in just my well-being. I just was taxed and overtaxed and drained. And I've had to learn, this is one of the biggest things I've had to learn, that you just can't do everything you want to do. And I've had to learn, when I say no, yes to a new commitment, I've got to offload something else. That's been a hard lesson, but I've had to learn that over the years. And now I kind of pause whenever there's a request to do anything, and I ask the question. Like, I had this happen 3 or 4 times this week where I've had requests for, mainly in the consulting sphere, and I've said to the person, they said, "Oh, would you be willing to work on this with us?" And I said, "I would like to. I just don't know. I'm going to have to go back and check to see if I have bandwidth for that. I don't know if I do until maybe 2023. I could look at it." So I want you to think about, and this may be just personal projects or personal commitments to a spouse or to a friend or whatever. Do you have the money in your account, time and energy wise, for what you're saying yes to? Here's the second symptom. You might know that you don't have the money or time and energy in the account. You might know that you don't have even the desire to do it. But you can't say no because of conflicts. You're afraid. You don't say no because you're afraid somebody's going to get mad at you. You're afraid to say no because somebody's going to reject you. You're afraid to say no because they're going to disapprove of you. You're afraid to say no because they're going to call you selfish. Yeah, I keep going on because there's no limit to how many different ways you can be made bad for saying no by a controlling, manipulative, or pushy person. There are some people I do business dealings with, and when they show up, it's like the first thing I say is no. Now, what do you want to ask me? Because they're always pushing for something. I got to show up with a big NO on my face before you even have the conversation. Now, look at your no muscle. Is it kind of sort of entangled with fears or all this other stuff? Can you say no? All right. Now, a cousin of that one is this one. You said yes for whatever reason, but you really have some kind of conflict with the person. And you're afraid to address that conflict, but you act out the conflict by not following through with them. And maybe you feel controlled, and that gives you a sense of control unconsciously. There's a word for this that any Psych 101 layperson would know, and that's being passive aggressive. It's an aggressive act to not do something, nothing bad about that word, but you're not initiating aggressively to face into a conflict. You're doing it passively by frustrating the person to have a sense of power. This begins early in life, sometimes with kids that wet their beds, all the way to husbands not following through on tasks because they're really mad at her, or they feel controlled and they want to gain a sense of power, and she gets frustrated, and unconsciously it's very gratifying. A lot of reasons that passive aggressive behavior happens, but it might be. So I want you guys following through. As Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Today, try it out. When somebody makes a request of you, you either really don't want to do it, or you feel like you kind of have to, or just say no, I can't do that. And I'll close with this. I had this experience yesterday. I got a request from a friend that had a family member that needed a psychologist in their area, a different city. And they said, do you know somebody in this particular city? And I didn't. I could have. There's 5,000 different ways that I could take the next 2 or 3 steps and go find somebody that knew somebody, sort of like you're one phone call away from the answer. I was slammed. I really didn't have time. And I just wrote back to him and said, no, I really don't know anybody, but here's a couple of people for you to call. Now, it was a really interesting moment. I was thinking about this content I wanted to share with you today. It's a really interesting moment. I don't know what made me do it. I think it's because I just had so much on my plate. Normally, I would make that call, or 2 or 3 calls, or track it down for him. But I remember when this moment happened. I said, I just don't know anybody here. Try these people. And he sent me back a text, thumbs up, thanks, appreciate your help. I'll go try it. And I thought, I wonder how many times it's really not a problem for somebody when we say no, but we think it might be. We'll put an extra burden on them. I don't want to put it on him. I can find this for him when he can't, or, whatever it is. It was just interesting that I bet many times we say yes to small things that kind of add up into big things. And I'm not at all telling you shouldn't be a service-oriented person or giving your time and energy to people. The very reason that I couldn't do that for him was because I'm doing a bunch of stuff for a bunch of other people. So it's not like, screw you, world, I'm not going to do anything nice for you. It's figuring out your time. Anyway, few keys to follow through. Some of you that work on teams might do well to have discussion about how many times will we not get something done because we should have said no in the first place. Saves a lot of time and effort.